Hey guys, welcome. In today's story, we're going to look at a young lady who had every reason to be mad at the world and to be mad at God, but instead she made another choice. So join us as we look into God's Word. You know, I don't know that there's any place in the world lonelier than an empty playground. Normally, it's such a joy, right, to be here at a place like this and hear the laughter and the giggles of, and even the screams that can sometimes get on your nerve, right? But still, that fun that kids are having, it's such a joy to hear and be part of that. Well, in today's story, there's a guy named Naaman who has a case of leprosy. He's a general of the Syrian army and basically has no hope to be healed of his leprosy. And in those days, Syria and Israel weren't necessarily at war, but it was a little bit more than a Cold War, because Syria had a huge advantage militarily, and so they would regularly go on raids into Israel. And up to this point in history, other than Miriam in the Old Testament, we have no examples of someone being healed of leprosy. And so that leads us to our story from God's Word. And the Syrian army had gone on to a raid in Israel, and they had captured a young girl. And this young girl ended up serving Naaman's wife. And one day, the young girl said to her mistress, "If only my master was with the prophet who is in Israel, he would heal him of his leprosy." Well, when Naaman heard that, he went to his master the king and said, "This is what the young girl from Israel said." There's our story from God's Word. So I'm curious, what do you think it might have been like to be a young girl and basically taken captive, drug out of your home? I mean, emotionally, what might have been going on with her? Can you see where that could have long-term effects? Well, let's look at this story. So it says, the Syrian army went into Israel, raided Israel, and brought back captive a young girl. How do you picture that in your head? I mean, is it like, "Oh, pardon us, guys, we would like to take your daughter with us into Israel. Well, she'll be a slave for our general's wife"? I wonder if it might have been a little bit more violent than that. We're not told in the story, but do you think there's any way that was a positive thing? And yet, you know, we see in the story that one day this young girl came to her mistress and said, "If only my master was with the prophet who is in Israel," actually called it Samaria, "he would heal him of his leprosy." I wonder, did this young girl have other choices? I mean, could she have been angry? Could she have been resentful? I mean, who might she have been angry at? Yeah, she could have been angry at Naaman, could have been angry at Naaman's wife. I mean, who else could she have been angry at? Yeah. But is that what we see in the story? What might we learn about this young girl and her emotional, might we even say spiritual condition by her response to her captivity? And you remember in the introduction, I said up to this point, nobody had been healed of leprosy, other, of course, of Miriam. So do you see this young girl taking a risk in suggesting such a thing to her mistress? Could it be that we learn something about this young girl and her relationship to God? I wonder, where might she have learned such spiritual depth at what's apparently a fairly young age? Possibly, does that tell us anything about her family and about their relationship with the Lord? You know, she had other choices. She could have been angry, she could have been resentful, I mean, she could have been hesitant. She just could have just kept her mouth shut, right? But I wonder if that might tell us anything about Naaman's wife, or even Naaman, as to how they may have treated this young girl. If they'd been abusive or mistreated her in some way, do you think she'd have been as quick to jump out and volunteer this kind of information and take this risk that this might not happen? Yeah. So I think we could possibly learn a lot about her family, about Naaman and his wife. You know, what might we learn about God? I mean, here's a young girl whose family apparently loves the Lord, and yet bad things happened. Does that tell us anything about this world we live in? Might we learn something about God's plan is not necessarily always for here, but sometimes his plans, well, sometimes, almost always, his plans have an eternal component. And it's easy for us to miss living out life here in the flesh. We saw in the story, this young girl could have been upset because of the way she was treated, and yet she exhibited love. Apparently she was one of God's people. I mean, today, do we still have opportunities to demonstrate God's love even when the situation might call for something different? I'm doing this video here in the United States, and in just a few days we're going to have an election. When that election is over, regardless of what happens, about half our country is going to be upset, one way or the other. They're going to be mad, and people are going to feel like they've been mistreated. People are going to feel like they've been taken advantage of. People are going to be angry. But I wonder, for God's people, for God's children, regardless of which side you are on politically, might we learn something from this young girl? Could we choose to be more forgiving for those that we might disagree with, for those that might have hurt us, for those that might have disappointed us? How might this young girl's reaction to her situation, how might this help us in the future? Well, this story is in 2 Kings chapter 5. I think it's verses 3 and 4, somewhere along there. But anyway, if you go back and look at this story, I think it might be a blessing for you. Also, if you would do us a favor, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I'd appreciate it if you'd just click on that little, I think it's a red button down at the bottom. But in addition to that, I would love to hear your comments. It just, kind of helps. We're trying to build this channel up. I'm experimenting, I'm learning. I apologize for some of the audio issues and even some of the light issues we've had in the past. Hopefully this one will turn out a little better than some of the others. But step by step, we're trying to learn what we're doing, because I believe that video and the internet are going to be huge tools for the kingdom. And so want to start learning how to take advantage of that now. I appreciate your patience and your help as we do this. So until the next time, keep telling those Bible stories.